The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learn here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Dr. Amanda Whitehouse is a licensed psychologist specializing in the intersection of chronic illness, anxiety, and medical trauma. She's a mom to 3 boys, one of whom has multiple food allergies, and she helps her clients with navigating the psychological impact of chronic illness, helping them build resilience, reduce anxiety, and restore confidence in daily life. She's the creator and host of the Don't Feed the Fear podcast, where she interviews experts and advocates and provides her own perspective on the experiences and support needed by the food allergy community. Well, Dr. Whitehouse, thank you for being here again. You were on episode 68 of this podcast around food allergies and building confidence and safety for our kids. So I'm excited to talk to you today about MCAS, because that, is hand in hand with the allergy world, but it's different and it's not at the same time. And so we will go over, I think, some of those nuances. First, though, I would love for you to maybe share a little bit about kind of your approach to therapy. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you work with SSP and the different modalities that you kind of bring into to kind of get the holistic picture of how you practice.
Sure. Thanks for having me back. I have found, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of overlap. And really, I say food allergies because that's what's happening in my house. But really, I work with a whole broad range of people with food related things. So MCAS, any kind of mast cell stuff is related, celiac, anything where we're kind of having this extra level of hypervigilance because we're monitoring our food intake, right? Food is supposed to be safety and a connection. And for us, it becomes anxiety and stress and fear. So I found in my work with that, we really have to regulate the nervous system. There's a lot of cognitive stuff out there that's shown to be effective for any of this range of medical concerns and anxiety about them. But I found in my work that we can't really cut through what's happening in the brain, that cognitive piece, until we tell the nervous system that it's okay to relax and receive that exercise and be prepared for it. So my focus is on a lot of that polyvagal theory, somatic work, nervous system regulation, and all of those things that help us get into a state where we can be receptive to learning and change because we feel safe enough when we're living lives elsewhere that feel constantly, validly unsafe.
Yeah, thank you for that. When I think about food allergies, or when anybody thinks, I think about what we've always known about food allergies, it's like you are allergic to a peanut, you are allergic to gluten, you are allergic to this specific thing, so just stay away from that and you'll be good, which of course, the fear comes in with well, did somebody contaminate it, or is it in something I don't know, right? But with MCAS, there's this whole other layer of I don't really know what I'm allergic to anymore, and I'm reacting to everything. And yeah, so how do we start to calm the nervous system down when the threats are really real?
Yeah, maybe I should clarify first too. I think this will be helpful. We say MCAS kind of interchangeably, and I'm certainly not a medical doctor here to explain, the differences, but I think this conversation will be relevant to anyone dealing with any kind of mast cell or histamine type of concern. So whether it's MCAS, whether it's mastocytosis, which is more of a abnormal mast cell production, from what I understand, or histamine intolerance is something that people talk about a lot too. All of what you said applies because food allergy is stressful, like you said, but sometimes, at least, hopefully it's clear that, avoid this food. And that's murky. It's not as easy to avoid a food as it sounds. But then add to all of that confusion that already exists when you're trying to eliminate a food and make sure that your food is actually not coming into cross contact. But then there's all this question about what even foods are causing it. And sometimes this food bothers me, but other times it doesn't. And sometimes it's this activity. And we fall into this spiral of always playing detective, always trying to narrow it down, tracking our every move, our every bite, our every symptom, trying to get clarity on it, which is necessary to a certain extent. But then it's also, there's a tipping point where it becomes counterproductive because there's not always a clear answer. One food genuinely might bother you one day and might genuinely not, and then the same goes with how to respond when you are having symptoms. Again, not a medical professional here, but it's not as clear how to respond to a reaction if you're dealing with MCAS or some kind of mast cell situation. If it feels like anaphylaxis, that's not as clear in terms of when to respond in what way. So I'm not here to tell you the answers to any of those things, but what I am here to acknowledge is that there are so many layers of more confusion, more hypervigilance, more uncertainty that is so difficult and so dysregulating to our nervous systems. We want an answer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should add to that too. Then there's also the layer of we still hardly know anything about it. And our doctors are often dismissive, or it just is unclear. Even if they are supportive and listening, it's really difficult. And a lot of times we really have to fight and be our own advocates to get a diagnosis, to get people to hear our concerns and take them seriously, not just our medical providers, but people in our lives too. So even more so than some other food related things, people really get that feeling that people think we're making it up, or, oh, that's just anxiety that caused that symptom in your body. And it's very real, but it's another thing we have to throw into the weight that we're carrying in terms of sorting it out and getting those answers. It's just so complicated.
Yeah, no, that's exactly spot on. I'm curious if you do have either specific types of doctors or different trusted professionals where you have either yourself experienced or with clients experienced some medical professional who actually can give an answer around like, here's what to worry about and here's not what to worry about as far as physical symptoms go. Have you? Yeah.
I mean, I think the two things that I can say to that are someone who genuinely makes you feel listened to, even if they don't always see things eye to eye, that you have a chance to express yourself, just kind of knowing what kind of response you're getting and being confident enough to find someone else if that person you've already talked to isn't the right person. But to take the responsibility yourself to go into that with some kind of clarity and organization in terms of how I'm going to make this appointment worthwhile. It's unfortunate that our medical system is the way that it is. They don't have an hour and a half to sit and talk about all of this laundry list of things. So if you can organize your thoughts ahead of time, try to get the anxiety piece of it, it's still going to be there, but don't let the anxiety present as the primary thing versus here's what I've recorded, here's what I've observed, here's a list of medications, all of that factual information that the doctors are going to want and need in order to make the best, diagnosis or differential diagnosis and help us start to narrow things down.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give a personal example, but my son, so he's going to be 2 in January. We're recording this in December, so he's almost 2. Um, within that first, between 1 and 2, like sometime within the last year, he has had 2 really bad adverse reactions to penicillin. And so the first reaction was a full body rash after like 6 days, right? So told the doctor, and like they were just like, okay, they didn't really give me anything, like any like advice around that or what that's supposed to mean, right? So then when I went back to the doctor, I think they kind of were like, well, we're not going to put it in as an allergy because we don't know. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, okay, all right, I'll just whatever. So then the second time he needed it, he started throwing up within the first hour after giving him the first dose. And so I'm just like, that's right. Like, what I would not, would you keep giving it to your child?
Right.
So nobody had answers. Then like one person put it in his chart as an allergy. And then the next time that I went into the doctor and I was talking about it again, they were like, does he have an EpiPen? And I was like, no. And they were like, oh, well, we don't really know if he's allergic. So they took it out of his chart.
Oh,
Now, I will say, this is where I'm like, okay, sometimes these doctors do know what they're talking about and they just don't know how to explain stuff because, so I've been like living with this kind of penicillin fear. Like, what if he gets another infection and needs, well, he swallowed my 4-year-old's dose of amoxicillin last week, and he actually, nothing happened. Nothing happened. He did not throw up. He did not get a rash. And this was 9.5 milligrams, milliliters, which is like an insane amount. I was surprised that that was even her dose. But
Mhm.
yeah, he got a hold of it. I had put it on, like, the doctor was like, how did he get a hold of it? My bad mom guilt was like I put it on the counter, and before I knew it, he was up on the counter, and my daughter had not drank it yet because she's 4. So yeah, that was my story with that. But it's like, how do you know, right? How do you live with, like, I never would have decided to give him penicillin just to try that out again, right? So I probably would have went for quite a while just like feeling like, no, he's allergic to it, don't give it to him. And now I'm like, oh, okay, maybe he's not. But I just wish somebody would explain the medical aspect
Right.
to me.
Right. Why are they giving you that recommendation versus just, oh, we're just going to take it out? Because of course, when your child vomits when they consume something and you already have a suspicion that there's an allergy, and I'm in that boat with you. My youngest, who doesn't have food allergies, has a penicillin allergy. And for those listening, I know that's not what we're talking about, but I would say to you, and that's what we've done, to go to an allergist, because there's a lot of false positive on penicillin allergies because of what you're describing. It's so confusing. And also just on your mom guilt, like that doctor is very far removed from having 2 toddlers in the home, because I can picture exactly 20 ways that that would happen. We put everything on ourselves, and sometimes the response, that we get from medical professionals doesn't help us to not do that, because it's totally, all of your confusion is totally understandable. And we want to know what to do, right? You want to know, you worry about the next time if this happens. Like you're saying, all that uncertainty just makes it more confusing and creates anxiety. Even he's not sick right now, but he's going to be again, right? We know these things are ahead, and we want as much clarity as we can get. And it's not always easy to get.
Yeah, especially with, I mean, I guess, yeah, I am saying MCAS, but I really am referring to kind of like any histamine intolerance, or especially with MCAS, like some people are like, oh, you can only have that if you have high tryptase levels. We do know we have criterion two now, in which you don't need, you can get that diagnosis without the tryptase levels being too high, but some doctors are still not on board. So again, more confusion.
It's so confused. So I was so excited. I got Dr. Zachary Rubin's going to be on my show, and I was so lucky to get like an advanced copy of his book to
That's
read before the.
amazing.
Yeah, and I was like, yes, there's a chapter on Mast. Like, I'm going to read this so I have the most information possible for this recording today. And it's a great book, but it's the same like as you're describing. We have some more criteria, but it's kind of not really still clear, and everyone's not really still following it. So, no, obviously it's not a criticism of him or the book.
No,
That's just
that's
up
just
to
where
date.
we are.
That's where we're
I
at.
mean, I was really hoping too. I have been waiting for this book for like a year now, and I was so hoping it was gonna be like, but yeah, again, not a criticism on him. It's like, this is just where we're at. This is all we know right now.
Yeah. And it is helpful. It's worth reading, because it did give me more clarity on it too. But yes, it's not your fault, anyone out there listening, if you are unclear or haven't been able to, find someone who is understanding you or express it in a way that makes it clear to your doctor whether or not this is or isn't what you're dealing with, because there's a lot to be learned still.
So how do you start to work with people then who maybe are like bubbling themselves in their house? They're not going out anywhere. They're limited on their food intake. They're limited on their medication intake. Like, they're suffering, but their world has been really reduced to their home because they feel like they'd be suffering more if they were outside of the home exposed to different things.
Yeah, and I think you asked me before too, like, how do we start getting their nervous systems regulated? And I totally sidestepped that, but it's really tough, because when you're at that point of restriction, of avoidance, of isolation, genuinely, you're in constant fear. You don't feel safe. That's not how we're designed to operate as human beings. So breaking that cycle, which really is it perpetuates in itself. The more we avoid, the more we feel safe from avoiding, but then we need to avoid even more, because that creates more anxiety. So we have to turn that around. And I have found, and this is just my approach, but social connection is really powerful. for the nervous system. It's a really strong safety signal to us. It's natural for us as human beings. Think of us when we are infants. We are designed to rely on the people who are caregiving, and connection with them tells us we are safe. We will be fed, we'll be protected, we won't be alone, we won't be on our own. So a lot of times when people are as far deep into this as you're describing, finding a connection socially that is safe, that is obviously validating and understanding, is sometimes the first tiny little baby step. And it might be someone in your real life, but it might not be.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is finding a podcast like yours, or someone on a social media, and that you can follow who's talking about these things, or a community. There might be groups, I know lots of different professionals like you and I have different virtual events for people. So sometimes that's really the first step out of that, is to find those people who get you, who know what you're dealing with, that will validate you, and you don't feel like you're completely alone in it anymore.
Great. It's really important. And yeah, a lot of times that community is found online. My hope for clients and people in my life is always that we'll find that get some of that safety online, and then we'll start finding that in real life in the people around us. But sometimes that just takes some time. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a slow process. And even if they're there, to trust them again, takes some time for your nervous system to feel safe, establish a little bit of safety, and build on it.
Yeah. What is kind of your approach to finding safety when somebody again is like super, super restricted? Um, is it a good cognitive approach of like helping them like literally look for signs of safety in their environment mixed with some of the somatic work that you do?
I would, yes and no, because I wouldn't call it cognitive. Now we have to actively think about it to do it, but really it's not cognitive work. We have to learn what the nervous system decides is safe, not what our brain says is safe. So we can, cognitive refers to like, okay, I ate this food 5 times last week. It's going to be safe, and challenging ourselves with the logical, rational truth. But we all know from experience that we don't necessarily believe that, right? Our nervous system doesn't trust that and feel safe. So when I start with clients just in terms of, we're not even going to talk a whole bunch about this other than for me to validate what you're experiencing. I'm going to teach you, this is how you talk to your nervous system, and it's not talking, right? It's sensory information. That's what the vagus nerve uses to evaluate constantly and on an ongoing basis whether or not you're safe. So if you can learn to give your nervous system safety signals, it doesn't have to have anything to do with your symptoms or food or histamine or any of those, just general human universal safety signals. That's how you can get it to shift out of gradually and over time. It's not, I hate when people say like nervous system reset. It's not a just do this and you'll feel better. It's a slow process of building trust with your nervous system, listening to your body and telling your body, I'm going to listen to you and the signals that you're giving me back.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's not overnight. It's not a nervous system reset. It's slow and gradual. And I know, I'm always talking about that online too. I just rage against it every day because I see it so much online. And it bothers me. So yeah. What are some of those social, like you were saying, that's kind of probably why you're saying, good social environments can encourage and foster safety, which just already inherently starts to calm that nervous system down. What about somebody who says, I have good friends, I love my family, I'm good, but that doesn't matter. I still feel like this, right? What is another approach that we might start to look for?
Yeah. So the other forms of safety signals, in addition to the connection, is the information that's coming in, sensory wise. So you and I have talked about my if there's anything close to like my magic wand or my secret weapon when it comes to nervous system regulation, it's a program called the Safe and Sound Protocol, and it's developed on polyvagal theory by the creator of polyvagal theory. So we don't all have access to that, but the premise of this is that. Our ears, just to take and isolate one of the senses, our ears interpret sounds differently. Some sounds indicate warning or threat, and some sounds indicate safety. This is part of why social connection is so important, because the voice of a calm, nurturing, receptive, engaged human is a middle range frequency that is a safety signal to the nervous system. High pitched sounds like a tire screeching or an alarm sounding mean that there's danger. Low pitch sounds are things like a dog growling or someone speaking in a really low, think of like a man's very serious, deep voice. Those are warnings. So, depending on what we're hearing, we're going to interpret, our nervous system is going to interpret it as safe or not safe, regardless of what we cognitively know is going on. So we can choose to incorporate some of that. But the problem is, once we get kind of habituated to drowning out the safety signals, and this applies for all of the senses. But once we kind of stop looking, our ears stop focusing in on those safety signals and are on high alert all the time for the high and the low signals of danger or threat, then we kind of start blocking it out. So that's when, probably like you're saying, those people who are like, I've got great friends, my family is supportive, but when we sit down and have a conversation, even though they probably are talking in those supportive ways, the nervous system isn't receiving it. So that is one example of ways that we need to rethink how we're communicating with it and not relearn, but make it safe enough for our ears literally to start hearing and receiving those safety signals again, not just, searching for danger all the time, the way that they tend to do.
Yeah, that makes me think, like, so the cognitive piece, the cognitive work sometimes might be, we do have to evaluate the people around us. Like, do you actually like the people that you're around? Do you feel safe around them? And from a mental, like from a cognitive standpoint, do you feel safe around them? And they might say, of course, yeah, I don't think my husband would ever harm me, right? Like that might be true. And yet when they're sitting down, their ears might be picking up on the not on the safety part of the not on the safety signals. And so a program like Safe and Sound Protocol, we haven't introduced that yet, but you offer Safe and Sound Protocol, and that is something that can help people's ears start to become attuned to safety signals. Can you explain that a little better than I just did?
Absolutely. Well, you're explaining it wonderfully, but it's a very slow, gentle program that basically it filters out what's not a safety signal to the ears and delivers this specially filtered music to the ears to it's like exercising, the ear has all these moving parts and different pieces, and to help it remember how to receive that signal again, and then to gradually add back in over time the high and the low frequencies that signal danger, but to still be able to focus on the middle sounds, the middle range, while the concerning signals are added back in. But the added bonus of that, and why sound is one of the best ways to do this, is because the sound waves going into the ears hit where the vagus nerve crosses down from the skull and through the neck and into the body. And so we can actually literally physically stimulate the vagus nerve with the sound vibrations at the same time. It's kind of a double whammy, double powerful signal to the nervous system. The only other way we can directly stimulate the vagus nerve, a lot of people hear about vagus nerve stimulators, and there's devices on the market. They're sending vibrations through the muscles or the tissue, but they're not directly hitting the vagus nerve. So I'm not knocking any of those things, but there's too many for me to know about each one. But they don't, as short of implanting an electrode and stimulating the vagus nerve, which is the way they do it in research in animal subjects, this is the most direct way to do it. But you don't have to have the program. Like in the example that you were talking about, like maybe the husband's voice, even though the husband is being supportive, maybe the frequency of his voice is so, some men just have those low voices that no matter how kind they're being, our bodies will interpret it differently. So being aware of it in your daily life is part of it too. And maybe like asking the people that you interact with to be aware of it, educating them too, that you really trust and are safe with in terms of how they can enhance that, sense of safety between you and your interactions.
Yeah, like maybe there's nothing they can do about their voice, but maybe like certain tones of voice or certain ways that they speak, or even just bringing in additional elements of safety into a conversation, like um, additional like words of affirmation, or additional, like if that's what somebody appreciates. Some of us really like to have like a softened, like before we tell you criticism, we might say, hey, I really liked this thing that you did. This one could use some work over here. Other people are like, just give it to me straight. I don't need to hear all of that. Like, so it's a very individual process. And I think it just requires knowing what it is that you like and don't like. Yeah.
Yeah, and adding, like you said, eliminating and adding to it other factors that might be part of it. So if I'm sitting with my spouse having a conversation about something that's challenging for me, and my kids are playing a video game in the background with screeching noises, it's not about the way that he's interacting with me. Even if that doesn't within my awareness bother me, my nervous system is picking up on it. And we can add in safety signals from other senses too. So if we're going to have a hard conversation, even if we want him to tell it to us straight, we might have a cozy blanket, we might have a warm cup of tea, we might do other things to add to or enhance the sense of safety in that interaction.
Yeah. That reminds me of how I practice somatic work. I don't practice the safe and sound protocol yet, but maybe soon. Um, I in somatic experiencing, one of the, well, like the techniques kind of all lead to figuring out where in your body you have a sense of safety or a sense of neutrality. So maybe my skin has, rashes, it tingles, it burns, things like that. But if I go deeper and notice my breath, or if I notice maybe my leg, or if I notice like my heartbeat, and maybe that does or doesn't have, what we want to do is for each individual find what doesn't have a negative charge. And so we're looking for the areas of your body that feel neutral or positive, bringing attention there, not because we're trying to say, oh, just think about the positive, but because we're trying to say, as you're experiencing this really painful sensation in your body, can you find the areas of your body that are not burdened by that pain so that it can help? Can you carry that pain? It can help carry that pain so that the weight is evenly distributed. And it sounds like, yeah, just like a very, very common underlying concept.
Absolutely. And that's so well described. You're giving me the visual of like literally like the distribution, we think of weight distribution, same thing. And I think that's the part that's so relevant to people who are dealing with the types of mast cell things, MCAS and mastocytosis that we're talking about, because there is so much signaling from the body. And that's another part. I'm sure you found this with your clients too. There's constant scanning, there's constant awareness and noting and observation of the symptoms. And like you said, it's really hard not to then remain focused on it all the time. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Did the thing that I just did or ate or the temperature of that shower make it worse? And so I love the way you're describing it. And I really even try, I'm sure you do this too, to use the word safety. Like, are there signals in other areas of your body that are telling you, even though you're experiencing those symptoms right now, you are safe in this moment? You might be uncomfortable, you might feel itchy, there might be pain, and you can know that you're safe. So breath, as you mentioned, is such a good one because the breath is always with us. And if we're breathing, we know we're doing pretty well, right? Even if some other things are happening, that's the most important factor. So that's why meditation and breathing is so effective. And that's something that nobody wants to do, but it really is. That's as simple as it gets when you're meditating. It's just focusing on that breath and knowing in this moment, I'm still breathing.
Yeah, I do think people get sometimes people get really hung up on when we say like meditation or breathing is effective, because they're like, what do you mean it's effective? I'm still experiencing this thing here. And like you said, though, one, it's a very slow process. And two, these practices don't necessarily cure what you're dealing with. And so it's an effective tool for helping you through, but it doesn't mean it's effective at curing your chronic condition.
Definitely. And I think they are a really good metaphor for, we talked earlier about then what cognitively, thinking wise, do we shift? But the physical work of the meditation and breathing is a good metaphor for that, because we are learning not to feel great or cure what's going on, but to tolerate it. So if you can breathe and focus on your breathing, you might not feel magically calm and peaceful while you're meditating for 5 minutes, but you're practicing tolerating whatever is going on in your body without resisting it, without rushing to solve the problem or change something to fix it. And ultimately, that is what we have. Once the body is receptive through those exercises, that's when people are more receptive to the cognitive work you mentioned, because then the bigger picture that we have to do is learn some acceptance of the constant uncertainty and shifting that is a reality of the medical, diagnoses or search for diagnoses that we're finding ourselves in.
Absolutely. Yes, because when you get curious and you accept kind of what is, that's when your body starts to calm down a little bit and not be on high alert, and not, we talked just now about safe and sound protocol and how that affects the ears and how that plays a part somatically. But same thing with your eyes. And I think this is why I'm not an EMDR practitioner, but why it can be so effective. Like, you're just teaching your body and your brain to have a wider capacity for stimuli, for emotions, for stress. And that larger capacity gives you a larger bucket, which might mean that now you need less, you can experience more stressors before the bucket overfills and gives you a symptom. So I know that's been the case for me, especially since becoming a parent. Like, noise, I mean, I know I'll talk freely about when my daughter was born and the crying. Like, it was so triggering, because not just like all the emotional stuff that comes along in childhood trauma and what that all means from a cognitive perspective, but literally physically my ears could not tolerate it. And so it was very difficult. And one of the things that I did to kind of combat that was sitting down with her, and like, as she was crying, just reminding myself it's okay that she's crying. Like, she's allowed to cry. She's doesn't mean that it doesn't even necessarily mean that something's wrong. She's just a verbal, and she still is, just like her mom, a verbal processor. So she was crying all the time. And I had to learn how to literally just be able to tolerate that. Like, can I sit here and breathe, look at the room around me, notice that I am safe? Because when she was crying, my eyes would just narrow to her and, like, frantic. How can I fix this? How can I make this go away? And if you sit down, expand your visual field, and actually allow yourself to take in the whole room around you, you realize, like, this is just uncomfortable. This isn't unsafe. So that's my personal anecdote.
It's such a good example because, yeah, people don't like that word acceptance. Like, how can I just accept this really horrible thing that I'm dealing with? But you described it. It's not that you don't have to like it. You don't have to enjoy it, but we're distinguishing between whether or not we're okay, even though this thing is happening. And okay is a spectrum, right?
Yeah, it's relative, right? Like, yeah, exactly. And we get to make meaning of that. We get to decide what okay is for us. That's the cognitive
Mhm.
piece of the work. But yeah.
Definitely. I just had a thought though that I wanted to go back to
Yeah.
because we were talking about obviously all of this stuff we're not saying this will heal your mast cell disorder or whatever's going on, but truly, vagal stimulation and improving vagal tone they call it the vagal break. And so that spiral that we talked about how stress and, constant dysregulation in the body creates inflammation and it fuels the cycle. So to some extent, not cure, but improve symptoms, improving your vagal tone can put that brake on in terms of turning around the cycle of things getting worse and worse and reversing some of that, not necessarily healing it all, but not escalating the situation as it is. Real genuine, physical shifts in the body can occur from this. So I did want to clarify that, even though
Yeah.
you and I are not claiming this is a cure for MCAS by any means.
Definitely not. But yeah, I think that's a good thing to put in here, because it's also like, why practice this if it's just some whatever? And it does have effects, but again, one, doesn't mean cure. Two, doesn't mean like you're going to feel better tomorrow. It's a long-term kind of thing. And it's wrapped up with, this is why it's so important to, in my opinion, do it with a therapist, because even people like, you bring something up with a sound, and then all of a sudden you're in a traumatic memory from childhood, and like, right. And not all therapists are even trained with how to handle that. It really is important to work with a trauma trained therapist. Yeah.
Such a great point. Yeah, because we can create a safe container. And when you lose the ability or are still learning to recognize what those signs and symptoms are for your body, we are trained to recognize it in the moment and steer the conversation and the session accordingly. So people who don't do what we do might not know about the window of tolerance, but we're trained to recognize when we're working on something that might be challenging or new or stretching you, but how far is too far? And we can see based on your body language or your facial expressions or your tone of voice or, so many things when it's time to back off of that and when we've pushed it far enough or, when you can tolerate a little bit more. Because like you said, it's expanding that container, but we have to do it safely. If we don't, we can create more trauma. We can definitely re-traumatize.
Yeah, I don't think people realize too that part of our training is not just this like textbook knowledge about trauma. It's, can you visually see it? Can you tolerate it yourself? I mean, I know it even in my like when I was newer, and even still now, like there will be experiences where I'm having an experience in session, like, oh, I am at my tolerance level with what they are dealing with. But the difference between, someone who has not only the training that we have and also the containers we have built-in supervision, we have other colleagues we know we can go to. We are not siloed unless we make ourselves siloed. So when that happens to me, I know immediately I need another professional to help me support. And then, I mean, now after 6 years of practice, it's like I all I need is like one session of that before I'm like, oh, I'm good. I've built a tolerance for this now, and I can go right in the next week with that client and not be triggered. Whereas my year one, like, yeah, I would be like week after week after week, like anxious to see this client, and am I going to be able to handle this? And that's just a part of the learning process. Um, and if you don't have the built-in support for that, like our profession does, then you're gonna either quit or do a lot of harm, um,
Mhm.
because you have to be able to tolerate that.
Yeah, and that touches on a piece of back when we were talking about the importance of social connection, we didn't really talk about that word that we both love and people talk about all the time and what co-regulation actually is. And that's what we're doing as therapists. It's like you're borrowing our nervous systems, and we have intentionally, with education and support and resources, increased our tolerance and capacity to stay regulated even when we're interacting with a person who is dysregulated. So instead of like what often happens in our relationships, one person becomes dysregulated and the other person joins them in it, we are reteaching your nervous system by staying calm when you are not calm, and then helping your nervous system lean on us for regulation. And that helps both with the stressors that you're dealing with, but that's part of what helps, you mentioned trauma informed. That's what helps heal stuff that maybe even be pre-verbal memories or traumas from you, from caretakers or whatever you might have experienced, medical events when you were a child, maybe. But then, knowing that you can be upset and be dysregulated, and there will be a safe person who will stay calm and regulated and safe and create a safe environment for you to experience that, then dysregulation itself doesn't feel so unsafe. Because many of us, especially, you and I have talked about attachment styles in the past too. That's another thing we could bring in. But many of us feel like if our attachment style to others says however they feel, I feel, and I have to stay okay in order to make everyone else okay, and vice versa. But what really heals that is learning, like having someone safe in the room with you to say, it's okay, you can get as upset as you want. I am here, I'm supporting you. Everything is okay, even if you don't feel like it is right now. Because if we don't do that, just being upset or just being dysregulated can feel unsafe because we're afraid that people are going to detach or pull away from us. So it's so healing, in therapy, to have someone that you can totally trust not to do that.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Because yeah, if you grew up with, let's say, a parent who said like, you can come to me with anything, or like, but then they were very like emotionally unstable when you were feeling emotionally unstable, then you have learned that anybody, a professional, a person you love who says, I'm here for you, may not be actually there for you. And so then putting the work in to try to rebuild that trust with a nervous system that just inherently does not trust that anyone is trustworthy is long-term work. Like,
Mhm.
and it's so subconscious too, because like that can be really confusing. Like, wait, but my mom was always there for me. She always told me she was, right? But then you never quite felt safe with her for some reason or another. And so that can be definitely re-traumatized even in the therapeutic relationship. And that's something I just wanted to point out. I think everybody needs to be aware of.
Absolutely. And yeah, because I think there are always unspoken rules or qualifiers, with even with parents with the best of intentions. I mean, people think we as therapists always just blame the parents, and it's not that simple, but all of our parents were doing the best they could. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they were flat out cold or rejective of you. But again, if they didn't never got the tools to regulate their nervous systems, they can mean it 100%. But if they can't stay regulated when you're sharing something difficult or scary, your nervous system feels that. Even if they maintain a calm demeanor and they don't raise their voice and they don't, respond in any way that's traumatic or abusive to you, your nervous system still understands, boy, I talked to my mom about that and she was a mess. I could feel it.
Like,
So I think it's really important for people to know that, we're not necessarily talking about really big, dramatic traumas that can create this dysregulation chronically in your system. It's little moments like that, and the byproduct of existing in a world that does not support our nervous systems, that doesn't teach us the skills. Everyone is lacking in this, unfortunately.
yeah, I agree. Yeah. And you get to decide. You get to decide like what you want to work on, when you want to work on it. You don't have to feel like you're always broken or, needing to do your next self-help project. That's not what we're advocating for here. It's really about figuring out what's just not working for you. And then now can I go and find those tools to help me. So in the realm of MCAS, I know we went really far off into the attachment world because we're therapists, but in the world of MCAS, I think, or any mast cell kind of disorder, yeah, your nervous system is on high alert, and that's not the fault of yours, not the fault of your parents. It's not anybody's fault. Like your nervous system is perceiving a threat that is truly there. Um, and also, we can do work around helping to calm that threat response down, because sometimes it is just way higher than what the actual safety protocol, like to keep yourself safe from the danger, requires.
Right. And I think,
Yeah.
we did get off the rails because that's who we do, but I think I want to validate it for people. The stuff that we're talking about is relevant to that because people who have experienced those types of things and chronic, traumatic events or CPTSD throughout their lives are more prone to these diagnoses and these types of problems. So even if it's not just work on the medical piece specifically or the diet or the restrictions, working on some of that past stuff can genuinely start to shift the way your nervous system works because it's a sensitized trigger, right? So it just jumps into it more regularly, more easily, more sensitively, and has trouble backing down out of it or turning the off switch on because of all these things that have primed your system. So it's not irrelevant or a side story. It really is kind of part of the core. And I would encourage people, if they feel they can find a safe relationship, to explore that with a therapist because it's not just about healing emotionally. It literally is about healing your body and your nervous system. And I took that way away from your question.
No,
I'm sorry.
that said, thank you for saying that. Yes.
I mean, the big thing that I think we touched on just briefly that I want that's also validating for people to hear is that there is so much stigma. There is so much we got all these internalized messages and ableized messages about people who are able to, exist in a certain way in the world, and they are harmful. And so I want to acknowledge that for everybody listening. If you find yourself dealing with something like this, that's another thing to work on with your therapist, right? Like teasing those out of your internalized belief, because we really do sometimes then can get in our own patterns of self-judgment and self-criticism and disappointment and guilt and shame for what we're not able to do or what's different about us. And everyone's body is different, unfortunately. This is not in your head, it's your body. And we're just encouraging you to listen to your body and do what it needs in every way, not just with your food intake.
Yes, perfectly said. Thanks so much, Amanda. I am looking forward to putting this one out there, and people can find you at the Food Allergy Psychologist.
Psychologist. Yep, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and my podcast is called Don't Feed the Fear. That's easy to find too. So yeah, I talk about all this stuff too.
And talk a little bit about maybe some of the groups that you have coming up, because I know you do like a food allergy support group and you do a couple other things. So what are some of the groups that you have?
Yeah, so I do occasionally run a group where we guide each other through the Safe and Sound Protocol, the SSP, which we're talking about. I like doing that in a group setting. You could do it individually with a therapist who offers it, and I would encourage you to find that if it's available. It's hard to find people, but I find it's more effective when we are doing it as a group and we get that social connection piece and we get the validation and support. So I'm in the midst of one starting now by the time this episode comes out, but follow me and you'll see about the next one. And then I do also do group it's not therapy, but it's educational support and coping skills and nervous system education for all of these types of things we're talking about, any food related medical concern, to help you learn everything that you and I are talking about today in terms of how your nervous system operates, how you can support it, and how you can heal it.
Yeah. Well, anybody who signs up for your groups, I know will not be disappointed because you do such a wonderful job at explaining these things in a very easy to understand and down to earth way, which sometimes when you're trying to explain it without the jargon, sometimes it gets muddied. And I just feel like you do a really good job at not doing that. So it's just honestly such a pleasure to know you. So thank you.
Thanks for saying that. And I'm so glad to know you too. Always love chatting with you. We could go on for hours.
Yes. Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then.